virtual cabinet meeting. It's not, is it, Hilary? The virtual standards committee meeting. Oops.
I do apologise for that, Councillor.
That's right. Good thing I looked, really. Of course,
The meeting is now live.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to this virtual cabinet standards committee meeting that's being conducted with members and officers at various locations, mostly in their own homes, I think, communicating via audio, video and online. There's also the opportunity for the public and press to listen and view proceedings. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members and officers are in attendance. Over to you, Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, can you please indicate your attendance in order to confirm that the required members and officers are present and can hear and be heard? If you don't mind, with your indulgence, I'll just call surnames. Billing Claire.
Yeah.
Billing Judy.
I'm here.
Brown.
Here.
Levitt. Councillor Levitt.
Yeah, I'm here when the mute works.
Thank you. Yep. Prendergast.
Here.
Dears Hanscom.
Yes, I'm here.
Strong.
Present.
Fake.
Yeah.
Don't believe there's any other councillors, district councillors. We also have independent and reserve independent persons, Nicholas Moss.
Here.
Peter Chapman.
Here.
And John Richardson.
Here.
We have Parish Councillor Martin Griffin.
Here.
Thank you. And we have officers Jeanette Thompson.
Present.
Ewan Atakatavu.
Present.
Isabel Alajules.
Present.
Lewis Franklin is on IT, and my name is Hilary Deneen. If there's anybody else I've missed, please let me know. Extracts from the remote and partly remote meetings protocol are included with the agenda, and the full version is available on the Council's website, which includes information regarding live streaming, noise interference, rules of debate and voting. Members are requested to ensure that they are familiar with this protocol. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? No, in that case, I'll hand over to the Chair, Councillor Judy Billing. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Hilary. Thanks for walking us through that. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies for absence? I've had one at a meeting at 6 o'clock from Sam Collins. Are there any others? No? In which case, thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the meetings on the 22nd of from 22nd of October 2019 to the 20th of October 2020. And I think that's because we've only just learned how to do this properly in a time of lockdown with signatures. Since the beginning of March, when we started to hold meetings remotely, we haven't been able to do this properly. We're now able to approve these minutes with the electronic signature of the chair being applied following approval of you all. So there are these 2 sets of minutes to agree from October 2019 and the 20th of October 2020. I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meetings of the Standards Committee held on those dates, unless anybody with very long memories has got something that they would like to challenge. So I'm proposing that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Ruth.
It's a second.
Thank you. Are there any comments about those 2 sets of minutes? In which case, Hilary, are you going to take us through a vote, or are we going to do it by exception?
A vote is very quick anyway. Either way is very quick, I think, because we'll know if it's carried on approval anyway. So those in favour of approving the minutes can raise their blue hand, which they can find either under the participants section or the other section that I can't remember what it's called. Thank you very much.
Mine has turned into a yellow hand since a new.
Oh yeah, there can be a hand of any colour, shape or size.
Okay.
And that's sufficient to carry. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so I now officially authorise the committee member and scrutiny manager to apply my electronic signature and initials to the approved minutes. And another word I've learned since the pandemic, as well as things like legacy hand and Zoom, is wet signature. And this is not going to be a wet signature, this is going to be a dry signature. Okay, so item 4 is notification of other business, and none has been advised to me. So I assume there isn't any. Item 5 is chair's announcements. So just so you're reminded, in accordance with council policy, this meeting's being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcement on the agenda. That's okay. Item 6 is public participation, and again, there is none notified. Item 7 is standards matters, and the report's going to be presented by the Service Director, Jeanette Thompson, Legal and Community, and our Monitoring Officer. So over to you, Jeanette.
Thank you. Well, you'll be relieved to know that I won't go through it in detail. In respect of the general standards matter update, there isn't anything further to say at this stage on the ethical standard recommendations or hashtag Jackie Weaver, either in terms of the consultation on virtual hearings, regulations and extension as far as I can gather as of today's date. I do have a slight update in terms of the number of complaints that we have received at 8.5. So since loading up the reports the week before last, we've had probably about another 4 or 5. So at least at this stage, involving around 4 councillors, although there might be others once we know whether some are formalised. But other than just saying that those are ongoing matters, it's just to obviously highlight that at this stage. Other than that, hopefully it's straightforward, and happy to answer any queries, Chair.
Okay, so could anybody who wishes to speak on this indicate with their blue or yellow hand? I'm not seeing any blue or yellow hands. And in which case, we can go straight to the asking for a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations on this item. And the recommendation is that the committee notes the content of this report. Ah, Richard, sorry, I now do have hands up.
Yep.
I'm just going to go into participants to see what order they came in. And in fact, I find that they came in a different order. So can you just wait a minute, Richard? Because I actually have.
I was just going to be prepared to second it or.
Lovely. Okay.
I'll take the hand down. Thank you.
I had Councillor Claire Billing first.
I was just going to propose.
Okay, so I've got a proposer and a seconder, but David wanted to speak.
I wasn't quick enough on my button to propose a second, Councillor.
Oh, how lovely. You all wanted to propose and second. How absolutely divine. Okay, so the recommendation that the committee notes the content of the report has been proposed and seconded. Does that have the agreement of you all? Do we do hands again, Hilary?
Let's just do hands if you're in agreement, and I'm sure that will come out. Yeah, there's sufficient hands for that to be approved. Thank you very much.
Okay. In which case, we move to item 8, which is the Local Government Association, or the LGA as we know and love it, Model Code of Conduct. And again, the report's going to be presented by Jeanette Thompson.
So thank you, Chair. Yes, we will have to spend obviously a little bit more time on this because it's, by the nature of this report, it's going to need a little bit more consideration. So obviously this relates to the LGA code, and you know, your consideration as a committee as whether you feel that it's appropriate to recommend this for adoption to full council. And if so, then obviously there's subsequent recommendations as detailed under 2.2 to 2.4, some of which relate to potential minor amendments, substitution of tables, but not going to massive detail at this particular stage. I think it's fair to say that, just as background, and I think as I've alluded to in the report, that the actual code has had a mixed response across the country. So certainly in monitoring officer circles, you will have probably 50-50 of them saying they will or won't recommend this to their councils, and that comes for a variety of reasons, from not feeling that it's usually as comprehensive as their own codes of conduct. Also, the more generalised things of there's an election coming up, why should we bother doing that at this stage, to, I think, certainly at the local council level, the fact that just the general disquiet that this doesn't really address sanctions, and of course it can't, because until the government decides to respond to the recommendations and all the legislation is changed, we have a system where there aren't effective sanctions. So I think there's a variety of reasons why it hasn't perhaps had the all over sort of swinging endorsement. Certainly as far as we're concerned, we've got a fairly developed localised code. It's fair to say we've had bespoke developments over the years since we first adopted a new one in 2012. But when you compare the two, they are fairly similar in many respects. They either go slightly more in terms of some of the things they're recommending, or slightly less. But I'm not saying this is a perfect code, and I think what I've always tried to highlight here is that it's part of a package of measures. So I did try in the report to address as straightforwardly as I could the pros and cons really under 8.5 to 8.6. I think it's worth recognising that despite the fact that everyone supports it, it has gone through a national consultation. I think it's recognised that despite that, there were various iterations of that, but I've double checked today. So the version that you've got, which is dated the 19th of January, as attached to the report, is the version that they've got on the website today. I think it is still a model that's got some nice parts to it in terms of it's got a short explanation under each sort of section. So it touches on as an explanation to each area as to how it would apply to councillors. So I think that's good. And I think that's good for not just district members, but that wider rollout to local councillors as well. But notwithstanding that, as it stands at the moment, as I've mentioned, the LGA have said that they will review it annually, and I know that they've commissioned someone who was involved in the preparation of the code to provide guidance. So if nothing, if nothing less, that something will come out of it this year, we will get more detailed guidance, and it's something that can be, I think, rolled out wider, certainly in our district, if nothing more. Having said that, and I did touch on this, there are a couple of amendments, and I don't want to go too far in proposing massive amendments to it, because notwithstanding the fact that I think we could, every lawyer or every monitoring officer could probably pick here and pick there, and we could all do bits and pieces. As you start to unpick what is the LGA model, you're in danger of going further and further away from any guidance that the LGA issues. So they're fairly simple proposals in terms of picking up a typo, just consistency of registrable. For some reason, I don't understand it, in one of the tables they've referred to the DPI for an employment. They said it's unpaid directorship. Well, that isn't actually in the legislation, so I'm not comfortable to put it in a code that we would adopt. And until those regulations are changed, I wouldn't want to give the impression that it applies to that. I don't think that it's worth including the recommendations from the Committee on Standards in Public Life in the code, because I don't think this is an individual thing for councillors per se to be held to account to. It's something for the authority, and I think it could be quite misleading. That said, you know, I'm flexible on that. If the members want to keep that in and just add another, the appendix that I've suggested as an alternative, which deals with dispensations, I'm happy with that as well. It's just I don't think that it actually lends itself to explaining the code. It's not referred to in the code. If we don't decide to go this route, and again, I'm not wedded to any particular point, but I'm conscious of the resources that would be involved. But if we don't adopt this one, we're certainly going to need to look at ours again anyway, and our associated guidance, and you know, because it's due for a review. So if you aren't minded to do that, then there will be a further piece of work that will, you know, quite a substantial piece of work that we'll need to do. Just touching on the sort of that wider aspect in the district and the local councils, we have done, if you like, I won't say a straw poll. Penny's, my PA's contacted them. I sent out some various emails just explaining what was available and whether they were interested in adopting this. So 23 of the 27 local councils have actually commented that they are interested in it. So that's not unsubstantial. And I think obviously on balance, it's therefore worth thinking about this, because I think we've known that, you know, supporting local councils is important, providing support to local councillors and clerks and all the issues they have to deal with is a benefit to us all. So I think it's worthwhile. So unless I can, you know, I'm happy to try and answer any further queries, but again, I think it is ultimately a matter for members to decide how they would like us to proceed.
Thank you very much, Jeanette. I've already got Councillor Richard Thate, first of all, and I've got Ruth.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Page 26 of the report refers to the capacity for the council to have its own version, but indicates that an annual review would be necessary if we were so to do. What I haven't picked up, and it may be in there, but I clearly, freely admit I haven't picked up, if we adopt the LGA version as modified, would the frequency of that review be the same or be less, or what?
Chair, I'm happy to answer that one. I think we still have to go through the rounds. If they review it every year and they come back and say it's exactly as it was this year, January 2021, then obviously a report can go to you, you know, as the standards committee to say they haven't updated it, therefore there's no review necessary of our own code. Then that's the way we would proceed. If on the other hand, they didn't, you know, that they've made some amendments, we'll have to consider, and it has to be adopted by full council, so you'd have to consider it and we'd have to recommend that on. But again, if we don't do that, then we'd have to do the same with our own. So, and I think that that's a far more extensive recommendation from the Committee on Standards in Public Life, because what they talked about is, you know, obviously the consultation with stakeholders locally and the rest of it. So I would be on a rolling programme with my deputies of actually doing a review every single year and contacting everyone, which I think is quite onerous, frankly, but nevertheless, it's something that's come out of that, you know, the recommendation on good practice.
Thank you. I've got Ruth next.
Thank you, Chair. So I think that there's a lot of merit in accepting something that as a standard model code that has been through an extensive consultation, even if it's not perfect. And the reason for that is I think it saves us a lot of work, which I think our officer Jeanette has alluded to in terms of reviewing it. And I think the other reason is because it gives us it makes it, in terms of the parish and town councils, it will mean that there's more, they're more likely to agree to adopt something that is a model code from the LGA than something that we've written. And I think there needs to be some consistency across the district with regard to parish and town councils as well as district, given that a lot of complaints come through from parish and town councils, and it's very confusing if, like me, you are both a district councillor and a town councillor. So I think it has a lot of merit in those terms. I've obviously been involved with the chair and others and the independent persons in reviewing it. So I've been, been through a number of iterations. So I've got really nothing else to say, but I just wanted to ask Jeanette about, I'm not quite clear on the Appendix C where it says on page 51, right at the end, the Appendix 3, replacement Appendix C for the code of recommended for adoption. Does that replace the Appendix C best practice list, or is it something else? I'm not quite clear, because I actually quite like the list of best practices, and I think we already adhere to most of them. So I just wanted to, if you could answer that question, that would be helpful.
It was suggested that we replace it with the dispensation, so not have the best practice recommendations, but just to have the list, which what we currently have in our own code, which is just explains how you can apply for a dispensation and the grounds for that. As I say, I'm not going to die in a ditch over whether you feel that you would like to have those. I just find as a sort of, I think that to have something that the member themselves cannot be held accountable for as appended to the code might be a bit confusing, but I accept if that's the direction we want to go. I'm happy with that.
Can I just ask, is there any reason why we couldn't have both?
We could have both, yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, then
yeah.
fine, and we'll just say that Appendix 3, we'll just have an additional appendix.
That would be my favoured option. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. I've got David next.
Thank you, Chair. It's along similar lines to what Ruth just said there. I think it's not perfect, but it's better than nothing, as it were. As some of you on here know, I've long advocated the return to a national standards code, which makes it much easier. It says in 8.6 not everybody may adopt. However, I believe many will adopt it. So having something with a little bit of commonality is better than the current sort of what we seem to have at the moment is 365 different local authorities with 365 different codes of practice, plus God knows how many parish ones, including the more unusual ones in Hansforth. I'm quite happy to go with it. And as the recommendations and with Ruth's suggestion for an amendment there, the only thing I want to pick up on is in the table 1, and I think Jeanette, you probably already covered this, but just for clarification, it's on page 43 of the agenda. It's got unpaid directorships in brackets, square brackets, which isn't part of the national code. And I did raise a query with the LGA, which I didn't get an answer to, is would that also include charity trustees, which carry out similar responsibilities and have similar legal responsibilities as well to directors and unpaid directors. And I think actually, I don't know if we can add it in, as it's not in, I don't believe it's in the law as such, but is it something worth looking at, or can we do anything with that?
Jeanette.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I'd muted myself. We're able to adopt it with amendments, and I would suggest that that table's replaced. I put an alternative one, which is just to, instead of the version that they have at table 1, that we include our version, and I've put it in there because legally it said carried on for profit or gain, and I can't see how you would say that is the case when it's any unpaid directorship. And again, you're right, David, it doesn't include reference to trustees, but there's those things that why would you make a different, differentiation between the two? Because your legal duties are pretty much the same in terms of those directorships and being a trustee. So we've always treated that an unpaid directorship is something that you would need to disclose, but under our code is a declarable interest, and indeed that's been reflected by the police's response to anything that's been referred by us by them, and they, so I'm not really sure why it was in there, but like you, David, I haven't had sort of clarification on that, and I don't feel personally comfortable giving the impression that it would cover that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to take Nicholas next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I just want to echo other people's comments. And I think for me, having done this for a while, the issue of consistency, particularly having 30 odd different codes across the parishes in North Herts and other authorities also, I think is undesirable, because it makes it difficult to test alleged conduct against a whole range of different codes that serve no really beneficial purpose for those whose conduct is being tested. And I think having a common code is helpful. And indeed, it takes us back, almost full circle. As David mentioned, there used to be a national code until it was abolished in 2011. And I think this is, in a sense, the next best thing that you've got to bring it back to some sort of consistency approach, so members can understand, irrespective of which authority they're on, there's certain common standards applicable to all of them. So for me, I think a common code, and this is as good as any. No code is perfect. This isn't. Ours, current one, isn't. But I mean, you can argue the toss, as Jeanette is saying, and it doesn't really serve any purpose. So having a common code, this is as good as any. And I would certainly, well, not a voting member, but I would support that. The other two other points I wanted to observe, the point about the best practice list. I mean, it's a matter for members, obviously. I am struggling to see how that actually assists members to observe good conduct. In a sense, it's a procedural list that may be applicable to the council to implement. It may not be, but it doesn't actually drive code performance for me. It's an administrative list of things that you might want to do, and if members want to have it, obviously that's up to them, but I can't see any purpose for it personally. And the other point I wanted to make is relation to the DPI. I think, and it's something I've discussed with Jeanette, I'm not certain that it's right for the LGA code to go beyond that which Parliament has determined. The SI is the law. Those are the rules against which conduct will be considered, not any additional points put in under this voluntary code. So for me, the table 1 ought to reflect accurately what the SI has. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. I mean, en passant, it strikes me that the best practice code bit is best used in development sessions as part of induction rather than anywhere else. Anyway, I've next got Claire Billing.
Yeah, again, I think it's desirable to have a code of conduct that's similar to other people's around the country. So this standardised LGA.
I can't hear you, Claire.
Can't hear me?
Oh, that's better. You faded.
This one seems, I looked through it and it was clearly laid out and seemed quite simple to understand. So I liked that about it. There were two questions I had. One was, do we know what Herts County Council are doing with regard to their code?
It's a really good question, and I don't at the moment. I suspect it will pop up again after the elections, because the county council has a sort of habit of doing things every 4 years rather than as rolling programmes. And that's my very feeble answer to your question, that I actually haven't the slightest idea. Richard, is Richard there? Richard, do you know?
Can't add or deny. I have no more knowledge than you do, Judy.
Okay, thank you. Sorry,
And
Claire.
then the other point I wanted to make.
Oh, do you want me to quickly answer that one quickly? I think that was the point about elections. My understanding from Quentin Baker was that he would want to wait until after the election, given you've got a 4-year term, all of you in, and he basically wouldn't want to introduce something before an election, and then, different membership.
Okay, so I accidentally got that right, Claire. Okay.
Yeah, the other point I wanted to make was to do with virtual meetings, and when you disclose an interest, it says in the LGA code that you need to leave the room. Can there be something in it that includes the fact that it may be a virtual meeting and you can't necessarily leave the room.
I've suggested a sort of minor, if you like, a footnote to it, just to explain that that definition of room would include the virtual room. And I know, obviously, picking up from a situation before, that we will make sure that at meetings we've got the ability to have that sort of fallout room, if you like, or however you want to describe it, in case this sort of thing comes up in future. So yeah, I think we'd want to cover those off to make sure it's clearer.
Thank you. Claire Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things I wanted to know. I think for me, it'd be a good move. I think it sounds like everybody's agreeing to actually adopt the LGA code, because I think it is a standard and it will get a lot more wider sort of comment and review. I'm happy to that. I also like the bit I heard from Jeanette Thompson about that we can add in appendixy things, or we could actually have perhaps a table somewhere where if we want to deviate or put in a bit more, or maybe change something that's in there, we have the ability to do that. So there's that degree of flexibility. One of the comments on hospitality in there. I mean, the new thing to me seemed to be about declaring if you've refused a gift or whatever, and that I'm not sure that I really see that as value. If a member has decided not to take anything or whatever, why do we need the rationale of why one would need to declare that we've refused something up to the value of £50? I mean, if I'm not clear in my own mind why that would be good and what the value of doing that is. So if anybody's got some comments, because that would be something I would perhaps say that, you know, if maybe in our own code we would say you don't have to say that you have you've refused something. That's a bit one. The other thing on the dispensations, and something that's always been a bit of a minefield, I think, is the role of twin hatters and what they have to, when they're declaring or not declaring on items of interest that they have when we're in, particularly in full council meetings. The other thing I want to like to, again, is the idea of the guidance on training of good conduct and what it is. One of the things I have noticed, and perhaps it's maybe that chairs need to have a little bit of additional training on what is good conduct from members that when they are in meetings. Some of the last meetings I've been in, it seems apparent that chairs don't understand that when we go into debate, once we finish debate and a member sums up, that's the end of the debate. And then we seem to have lots more coming back from members afterwards. I've also heard raised voices, and I've also heard swearing. And again, I think those are things that chairmen should be understanding of what their role of chairing is. No, of course, to an experienced chairman like yourself, Councillor Billing, but and again, and that just looks bad for the whole of us if we're allowed, or a chairman allows that to go on when we are together and in debate. So I'm particularly interested to know again about the chair training. And it's training on the member conduct, not just for members, but also for chairs of committees.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Claire.
Yeah, that was that. I'm just looking down my notes if I've remembered everything I was going to say. Yeah, and that's again about how to do the training, because I think there was a note in there, financial implications of having a trainer in, and there was a value, I think, of £600 plus VAT for one session. And I don't think I've ever been on the council yet on a training session where every single member of the council has turned up for that training session. So again, it's making sure that if we're saying that every member has to be trained, it's knowing that every member does get trained. And also, again, it comes back to what training members can do where they don't have to present themselves in a training room to actually get this hammered through.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank
Jeanette,
you.
do you want to come back on some of that?
Yeah. I mean, picking up the training point, obviously the LGA model makes it clear that they would expect all councillors to attend the training session. I think if we go with this model, I think it would be a good start as part of the induction to use the person who's produced the guidance, and that's the basic quote of the 600 plus a follow-up for 300. My thinking of that is obviously it could then stretch beyond that, but obviously we still need to find the money and our first port of call would be to look to the member development pots that we have and at least take some out of that initially. So I'm not anticipating, nor would I be asking for additional money at this stage. I think it's possible that after those initial sessions, myself or Isabel or Nuranata could pick up what we have and either make it available to members. So within that year period or a reasonable period of time, they could have that. But ideally, I think it would be good to actually have them in these sessions, and they would be virtual sessions, and potentially we could use those for the local councils that have adopted it as well. So I don't see it as a finite thing. I think it's very useful. We can pick up those other issues in terms of, if we need to, the chairing. We do provide, and I think obviously both Ruth and Judy know that we do have different training sort of packages that we roll out for chairs anyway, and they do all attend those. It's unfortunate about the right to apply and who's got the right to come back and things like that. Frankly, I think it's probably because it is quite tedious for those people that haven't got used to that. Some people have been doing this a long time and they understand how the rules work. Some people don't. I try not to be too overbearing on things like that and keep popping my hand up. And it's often that the chairs in the throes of what's going on don't remember the rules for various reasons. So I there's a balance there between constantly sort of stopping people, but I do obviously understand that it can be annoying when this happens, and it is something that we try to remind anyone that's chairing beforehand and in briefing sessions what the rules are. But I think we'll again try and pick that up. As to dispensation and twin hatters, I think doesn't always come up. Obviously it can be an issue where you have to be careful in which forum you're going to decide if you like to commit yourself to voting, and if you've voted in a particular way in one sort of element or tier of local government. And I think you've either got to decide which one you're going to do and reserve your position. So you either say that you've already voted on this particular issue and then you therefore can't participate in a county level, or you do it the other way around. So but I'm sure that's something we could pick up in training as well.
If I could just add to that, it'd be nice actually to come up with some examples of those sorts of issues. So if Claire and others would like to jot some down, the twin hatter ones, that would be really quite handy. We don't need to explore them now, but that there are quite a few possible conflicts of interest in that area, which would be worth talking about more with a bit of notice. I've got.
Can I just? Sorry, Chairman. Can I just ask Janet? You didn't pick up on my not declaring the gifts that have been refused.
Oh no, that's a funny.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that one.
I wouldn't let you, obviously.
You had quite a comprehensive list there, Claire. I think I would say that we don't currently do that. I have in the past had people that automatically tell me anyway. I would keep a note of it, but we don't require it. And I agree with you. I wouldn't necessarily want it to be overly sort of enforced in terms of having to run around and find out who had been offered what and refused it. I mean, to be honest, if you are offered something, do you know if it's going to be over £50 or not? I don't know. Maybe you do automatically, and whether you would need to declare it to me might become a bit of a sort of bane in your life. I wasn't anticipating that many of you got many gifts of the value over £50 each time, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to endorse that we wouldn't need that in our code if that's something that you wanted to take out.
I think the biggest problem for me with it is that if somebody offers me something and I turn down a dinner or whatever, and then somebody else then says, oh, she turned that dinner down, but I haven't recorded that I turned that dinner down, then I'm in trouble.
Okay, Claire, I'm going to assert myself as chair and say that we can't just go backwards and forwards on this one between you and Jeanette. And I did recently turn down the offer of a free Chicken George dinner, but I'm sure it wasn't worth 50 quid. So I'm going to move swiftly on now to Martin Griffin. Sorry, Martin, you've been waiting for ages.
No, it's all right. It's been covered now. I'm quite content. Thank you.
Okay. All right. In which case, again, rules of debate in a committee like this, we can come back and say things more than once. Can we, David Levitt? Got you next.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, most of it was covered by Claire anyway. And really, all I was going to come back on was that bit about the refused gift. It does say it says significant.
Yes.
You know, cup of coffee, little meals, not significant. Envelope full of fivers is, but I would hope people would declare that anyway. So I haven't got a problem with leaving it in as it is. You know, significant could be better as 50 quid, the same as, but
okay.
It's one of those not perfect bits.
All right, thank you, David. I've got Martin next. Martin says,
okay, I haven't spoken so far, and I'm generally in favour of going the LGA route. I think that's for the reasons everyone said. I wanted to come back on that 10.3 about refusing a gift, and I think it's more in connection with 10.1. It's a sort of negative of 10.1 rather than 10.2. 10.1 is that you've got to be very careful not to accept a gift if it implies that is for influence. And I think it's very important, and it could perhaps be better, better written, that if you feel that the fact that you've refused a gift was that somebody was intending to influence the way you might vote on something, then it's very important to protect yourself, to report it. And I think it could be better written to reflect that, because I think that's really what it's all about. I totally agree with Claire that, you know, if you turn down a dinner, it happens to be a very posh restaurant, it's over 50 quid, and you don't, that's nonsense. But if somebody who's got a significant planning application in comes and says, well, look, I'll take you out for dinner, and I'm sure you'll see it my way, then it's very important that you report it.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. I haven't got any other hands up, so I'm hoping that we're therefore maybe at the point where we can look at the recommendations. Is that right? I don't want to.
Judy.
John.
Terribly trivial, but I'm new to all this. I was surprised that there wasn't a general code anyway, so I'm delighted doing it. It is badly written in some places. I mean, I know this is pathetic, but they spell behaviour in the American way, then the English way. Then there's a strange sentence in 7.2, I will when using the resources of the local. And it doesn't say what the local is.
It doesn't mean the pub, I don't think.
Well, that's what I was thinking about. And then throughout it is in the present tense, then it suddenly becomes future tense. It's an oddly written thing, sorry, as an outsider, and I guess it's a public document. They could do better.
Yeah, okay.
It's a very terribly pathetic point, but I'm making.
No, it's not a pathetic point, but I suppose they are people as well at the LGA.
Really?
And they haven't been sitting around tables encouraging each other closely either. But no, they're perfectly fair points. And I think if you're writing public documents, you should write them properly. You're absolutely right, John. Peter Chapman.
First of all, I take what John says there, but I do agree with Councillor Billing that it is clear, I think, and I think that's a virtue. It's accessible to ordinary folk, which I think is a good thing. But I've got a practical question, because it sounds as though, well, I thought we were moving towards accepting this code until John just threw his banner in the works. But if we do accept it, from a practical point of view, the day after we accept it, that is our code, all our protocols and modus operandi for the existing code are firmly embedded and well practiced and so forth. Will we be able to more or less adopt those without too much jiggery pokery? Because we will need to be able to apply the code, won't we, once it's accepted?
Jeanette.
I'm not sure I understand the question properly.
I didn't either, which is why I threw it over to you.
Our code do not, if you're talking about other protocols, we just refer to our NHDC code. So whichever one that our other protocols refer to will be based on whatever we adopt. And I don't think our complaints handling procedure would have to change. In fact, the only reason we might want to change it is if the LGA come up with any recommendations we might want to take into account. But currently, that would be it. So I'm not sure that there would be a problem.
That's what I meant.
I'm not sure there would be a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got Claire again, and then I've got Nicholas again.
Well, I'm very happy if you want to take Nicholas first, because I wanted to ask a question about the recommendations.
Okay, Nicholas.
A very simple point. I mean, we've got three main instruments. We've got the code, the guidance to the code, and the complaints handling process. Right, well, our code will be replaced by the LGA code. Instrument 1, Instrument 2 will become the new LGA guidance to replace our guidance. And as Jeanette is saying, the complaint handling process will be applicable irrespective of the code to which it is being applied.
Yes.
But as Jeanette is saying also, there's some bits in that which need a bit of a tidy up, but that's nothing to do with which code we have. It's merely the procedure that needs to be looked at and tidied up in the context of experience or of operating the process rather than the process to which it's applied. So 3 instruments, very straightforward for me anyway. Thank you
very much, Nicholas. So Claire, what was this about the recommendations?
2.4 was my question, which is the training on the new code be compulsory for all district councillors during 2021-22.
Yeah.
And
what's the sanction? Is your question, what is the sanction?
Yeah, I mean, if you haven't gone to the training, I mean, as you know, I have this thing about the code, the councillors training for planning.
Yes.
Which, although it's compulsory for all those that sit on the planning committee, I actually believe it should be compulsory for all members of the council, because we all deal with planning applications one way or another, because we have residents who often come to us, or we're in parish councils and it's useful to be able to apply. So that is not compulsory. Now we have, and it wasn't made compulsory, even though I would have loved it to have been. And here we have a one saying it will be compulsory. So yeah, you're right. What's the sanction for all members if they do not attend the training?
Well, before the question of the sanction that I'll go to Jeanette about, the other issue is that absolutely nobody can argue that their conduct isn't an important issue and part of their role as a councillor. So I think that's quite a strong argument for its compulsion. But Jeanette, what's the sanction? Do you get reported to the Standards Committee?
Yeah, basically. I mean, that reflects, if you like, what would be in the new adopted code under 8.1. I undertake code of conduct training provided by my local authority, and the recommendation picks that up and gives a time frame in which I think it's reasonable to expect that any member should avail themselves to undertake what is training on a new code. I mean, I know it's not completely different to our code, and I know that members will have different experiences over the years, but I think it's important to recognise that we would want to make sure that they had up-to-date training and they had bothered to go along to that. Does that answer? Basically, I would be picking it up and I would be trying to arrange. I think when we've had these conversations before, it would be about me saying, "So, can you go along to this session? Okay, there's some alternates that are arranged, and usually we'd have up to 3 that are arranged, and I'm sure we could facilitate it if they didn't manage to get to the ones arranged by the external trainer, if we go that route, and either myself, Isabel, or Nuranata can pick that up. Not ideal, because I think it's still good to have it with a national trainer, but I think we can manage that. I just think it's important to recognise and underline that this is a new code and they should attend the training.
I don't disagree. In fact, I welcome compulsory training, but maybe it's just the wording, because it just says compulsory to all district councillors during the 2021-22 year. Then if a councillor hasn't taken the training in that year, then what?
Well, I'd have to be, I would hope that wouldn't occur, but if it does occur, then basically we'll be looking, unless there's a reasonable excuse for me to refer it to the committee.
Yeah.
Which I would hope would not be necessary. Let's put it that way. I mean, I'm trying to be pragmatic about this and also give the, that we ought to give the sort of recommendation which is appropriate. So hopefully that it'll all come together. But I recognise if someone's ill, if someone's got coronavirus, if there's some reason that something happens during that year where they can't undertake the training for a legitimate reason, I won't be referring it. But clearly this will go through some sort of process of me discussing things with the chair and vice chair of the standards committee before we actually decide what to do.
But if they make a plain refusal, I've been elected as a councillor, how dare you tell me how to behave, then that's a different way of looking at it. Before we move to the recommendations, one of the things that I think has got grievously lost, it's just a personal opinion, I've been chairing and not giving too many, since the original standards regime at the beginning of the millennium to now, is the notion that if you are elected as a local councillor, an MP or anything else, I believe that your conduct should reach high standards whether or not you are on council or parliamentary business. And that seems to have got completely lost, that there is now a defence that says, oh, I wasn't acting as a councillor at that moment. And I'm very old school on that. And I believe that if you are elected as a councillor, you are actually in the public eye as a councillor at all times. And it's no good saying it was Saturday night and I wasn't on council duty. You are still seen in that role. So I think that's a great loss. Anyway, end of my hardline bit. Can we move now to the recommendations? Recommendation, and are we happy to take them as a block, or are you going to ask for separate votes on each of them? I'm going to put it to you that we're happy to.
Shall I just make sure that I'm clear what, so if you are recommending to full council, then it will be that it would have the replacement, it will still have appendices that are attached to the code of A, B and C. There would be a replacement, what I'm suggesting is a replacement table which just sets out the disclosable pecuniary interest as we have in our code in substitution for table 1 that's in there. We will have, instead of replacing their appendix C, you would want me to have an appendix D which has the dispensation. So and also we're going to have this registrable and pick up a couple of the typos. I think I'll have to pick this out and put it into a separate report so it's absolutely clear referring back to this, but for that element of the recommendation, I just want to make sure it's clear, because obviously I can gather from the conversation we've had that it wasn't absolutely clear. Were there any other amendments that you wanted?
No,
Did you want to pick up these others on the gifts and hospitality, or are we leaving that to full council?
I think we should leave that to full council because there were arguments both ways on that. I've got Nicholas and then Ruth.
Can I just be clear, well, it's a matter for members, but what the position is in respect of the best practice schedule? What do you mind? Just so I'm clear.
Yeah. I thought we were going to take it out.
That was my understanding.
But use it as a training tool.
That's my understanding of where you got to, but is Jeanette clear on that? I don't know if that's what you
I wasn't clear on that one. Do you want to vote on that bit? I know Ruth suggested we kept it in. We haven't really had any sort of discussion on it wider.
Okay.
Chair,
yes, Ruth.
It was on exactly the same thing that I was going to say. So I made a proposal that we kept the best practice and then added in the bit that Jeanette's proposed, Appendix C, as another appendix, Appendix D or whatever you want to call it. But other people are saying they don't want the best practice guidelines in there. You yourself, Judy, said that you'd prefer them to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
So there, but I'm happy to go with the majority, but I think we need to be clear what we're voting on there.
Yeah. Jeanette?
Yep. Okay.
I thought we were taking out that appendix.
Yes, that's
and
fine.
using it for
So
training purposes.
that will come out, and so it's clear that what goes to full council will have that replaced, if you like.
Okay.
Then 2.3, hopefully that's straightforward. We are, as far as we're aware, still proceeding with the poll on the 6th, so to come into effect on the 7th of May. The final one, are you happy to take that as it is?
I think we were. I think we needed to clarify what the sanctions were. And we know that they're not particularly strong, but there's still a pressure. There's still a pressure. I wouldn't want to be reported to this committee for not having done some training.
Okay, so that could be reflected in the recommendation. Say failure to do so would be a breach of the code, potential breach of the code of conduct. I wouldn't want to say an absolute, because that's got to have the caveats that we mentioned.
Okay.
So a potential breach, did I hear you say, Jeanette?
I think we'd have to say that in case anything arose in relation to health or anything that could happen during that year for whatever reason that prevented attendance.
Okay. Are we, on the basis of that complicated set of recommendations, happy to move to a vote of them en bloc, please? If you're not happy to move to a vote, tell me now. But it seems as though you are happy to move to a vote on that. So, Hilary, are you there?
I am here, Chair.
So would you like to guide us through the vote again?
Okay, so you are voting on the 4 recommendations as
amended.
As amended, that Jeanette's just explained, as amended as she's explained. If I ask you to raise your hands if you're in favour of those recommendations, please. That's clearly carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. And there being no further business that I'm aware of, I believe that our next meeting, the Standards Committee, is on the 19th of October 2020. And do you know, because of this strange world in which we live, I couldn't work out whether that was near or far, or I just have no proper sense of time anymore.
Or
So,
even, Chair, due to my typing errors in the past.
or even in the past. Absolutely. So no wonder I was confused by.
No wonder we're all laughing.
But we will have the joy of discussing this again at Council in April, and obviously your annual report, Chair.
Yes, I can't wait to present my annual report. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Judy, before we close, could I just say something which is nothing to do with the Standards Committee, but I just
Only
want
if it's nice. Only if it's nice.
I just want to take this opportunity to say well done for your Holocaust programme on that. I thought it went extremely well, and I was very proud of you.
Thank you very much. Oh, how lovely. Oh, I'm going to get all funny now. So we better go, or I get all weepy.